Joining me now is my son, Matthew Dunninger. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. I'm grateful to be here.
It's been a long time since I've had you on set with me, hasn't it been?
At least 7 years, yes.
At least 7 years. But today's very special. Tell us what you're currently studying and where you're a student.
I'm currently an aerospace student at the University of Michigan and studying aerospace engineering.
Pretty exciting. And with us now is going to be an astronaut. I know.
Dr. Bernard Harris.
Dr. Bernard Harris, welcome to the show. Hi.
I am glad to be on the show.
So I have done a lot of research, and obviously so has Matthew, about you. And one of the things that you have is you have a new book, or maybe fairly new, called Embracing Infinite Possibilities. Can you tell us about your book, please?
Yeah, so my first book I wrote 10 years ago, and it was a memoir, basically kind of describing my life up to that point. And one of the chapters at the very end talked about reaching your full potential. So investing in you. So I wanted this book to be dedicated in helping young people like Matthew figure out what they want to do in life and then provide some tools for them to accomplish their dream, whatever their dream is.
For you, what was that moment in faith that had you step out and know that you wanted to, walk in space, that you wanted to be an astronaut?
Yeah, I was one of those kids who was fascinated with science and science fiction. And I watched the space program develop right before my eyes, the Gemini program and then eventually the Apollo program. And when I was 13 years old, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon, and I knew that I wanted to follow in their footsteps.
Well, speaking of those wonderful astronauts, Matthew,
Yes.
yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, honestly, it's the same here. You are an inspiration like those astronauts, and watching, the space missions, I wasn't alive for the first runs, but watching them now, it's still inspiring to me and what caused me to go into aerospace.
And I don't think my son even knows this, but my father, Larry Campana, worked on Gemini. He worked on that project. He was working at McDonnell Douglas back in the day and was involved in that as well. But I've also been fascinated with space, and even though I'm not an astronaut, enjoy getting to hear firsthand experiences for you. So Dr. Harris, what was that moment like when you knew that this was going to be successful? Like that moment, that epiphany, if you will, of the moment it actually became a reality for you?
So first of all, let me say that you guys are in the family. We have this thing at NASA. Once you're a part of NASA, you're always part of NASA. And it looks like now this is the third generation that's going to be involved in aerospace. So I'm excited for you. So it was, for me, it was watching Neil and Buzz land on the moon. It was then me going to NASA, writing to NASA, because we didn't have the internet back then. So you couldn't go and Google anything. And so I had to write to NASA to find out what the requirements were to become an astronaut. And as part of that information that they sent back, they sent me some photos of some of the astronauts and signed pictures, and that made me even more excited. And then later on, when it really came time to get serious about what I was going to do, meaning I'm finished up high school, getting ready to go to college, I had to decide on what field I would go into, because I couldn't go to college to major in being an astronaut. There was no such major. And so I decided to follow in the footsteps of another great man, a guy by the name of Joe Kerwin, who was the first American physician to go in space on board Skylab. And when I saw that, I went, okay, that's my path.
It's nice when you talk about infinite possibilities, right? So what is that book about? Like, how can someone engage with that technology or that knowledge or that wisdom that you've gained in order to implement that in their own journey through your book?
Yeah, I think one of the first things, like first steps in going through your journey, is taking time to figure out who you are, right? And ask those life questions. Who am I? What are my skills? What appeals to me? When I look at something, what excites me about it? And for me, it was the space program. So looking at the space program and getting excited about what I saw. So I knew that inside that there was this yearning to be part of the space program. And then it was then to figure out how to my skill set, who I am as a person fits into that. And so along the way, I got befriended by my family physician, who happened to be an African American physician in the town that we were living. And he took me under his wing. And I realized that there was a second thing that I fell in love with, and that was that I like helping people. So putting those two things together really set it for me. And so when I talk to young people, I said, you need to, when you're looking at something that you want to consider, test it out with your head first, things that you see something that's exciting that you might want to do, but then really set it if it feels good in your heart. So you want to do two things, the head heart decision. And if those two things coincide, that's what you should do.
An astronaut and a physician, both, and an author. Many, 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 many things. I know, Matthew, you had a question that, as we were discussing, researching Dr. Bernard, what were your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I was fascinated about your plethora of experience in both medicine and space. And as you know, space travel could be taxing for the human body, especially with microgravity and difficulty exercising. I wondered, as an expert in both areas, what is an issue in space health that you would like to see solved in the next 10 years?
Matthew, that's a great question. And it was a question that I asked myself right before I joined NASA, because when I talked to a mentor who was involved in aerospace, I said, this is what I want to do, but how do I break into it? How do I stand out? And he said, go and research NASA and find out what is the biggest issue about humans in space. And so that's what I did. And I found out that there were a lot of medical issues. When you take a body that's developed in a gravity environment and you put it into a microgravity environment in space, all bets are off as to what you will find. For example, we lose 1% of bone per month. We lose about 15 to 20% of our muscle mass because we don't need muscle to walk around. We just float. Our heart gets smaller. And the gravity or the lack of gravity impacts us on the genetic level. So there were a lot of open problems that needed to be solved. And I picked the bone problem. And so I started working on that, started studying calcium metabolism. And then and that was at NASA Ames Research Center out in California. And then when I moved to Johnson Space Center, I joined what was called the Crew Healthcare System. So all of those things I just touched on were all under an umbrella of an organization that was supposed to solve these problems. And one of the ways in which we solved at least the muscle and bone problem, or at least helped the muscle and bone problem, because it's still not solved. We still need your help, Matthew, by the way. We still need your help there, is that exercise. And so I helped to develop some of the exercise equipment that's currently in the International Space Station as we speak.
Well, that is exciting because Matthew, one of the things he enjoys doing, he wants like to be an inventor, right? And that's one of the things you were thinking about.
Yeah.
Technology. How can you
apply, technology and engineering to solve the problem of exercise in space? Because as you said, your muscles start to atrophy from lack of use, and that's something I personally care a lot about fitness and about engineering. So that was one area of interest of mine.
It's a great question. And you also, Doctor, said that you're very focused on helping others, and you have a nonprofit. What are you doing with that foundation now?
So in 1998, we formed the Harris Foundation, and we did that to support a program that had already developed a few years earlier called the Bernard Harris Summer Science Camp. And this is where we bring in inner city kids, rural kids, middle school, onto a college campus. Let me tell you how important that is. In many of the cities that we had this camp in, we had kids that lived around the college itself and had never set foot on the college campus. And I can't tell you what a difference it made when you would take these kids that normally wouldn't be exposed to a university and you bring them on campus and you teach them about math and science, and you bring college students that are closer to their age to talk to them about life as a college student. It changes their lives. And so we managed to do that program amongst others, but we were in 30 different universities on an annual basis, probably for about 15 years or so, and made a serious impact. And just as a side note, if I can throw this in, I was actually the commencement speaker for Wilberforce University this weekend.
Oh,
And who met me at the door was one of our campers from almost 20 years ago, who was a professor at the university, not only professor, but a provost. Now, I was so proud, but I also felt pretty old too, because
well, it's wonderful that this space and this time has brought the three of us together. I thank you for your contribution to with your knowledge to our audience, and in particular as the mom of Matthew. Thank you so much. Matthew, did you have any final thoughts?
I would just like to say thank you again. Truly, what you did in space and along with the medical field and inspiring the next generation has been a benefit to all of us. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank
you
you
are
so
welcome.
much.
And remember, you are the next generation. So go out there and make a difference.
Happy journeys to you always. Thank you so much, Doctor. We really appreciate you being here. Dr. Bernard.
Dr.
Pretty
Bernard.
good. That's amazing. Thank you. Happiness. Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye.